Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sherry Thompson, and I'm the editor of the Pennsylvania Administrator magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to the fall edition of Ask the Author. I appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy schedules to join us today, and I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Jonathan Ross, who is a member of the magazine's editorial review board and also president-elect of the association. John?
Very nicely done, Sherry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. I can tell you rehearsed that.
I did.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, first of all, to all of our panelists. The great thing about our association and our publication is that it's member-driven. I love seeing all of the different articles that come out every month. And it's, you folks, us folks, myself included, I guess, the folks that are doing this job every day, the knowledge that we're able to share with one another, the ideas that I get from reading through that. And this is just another layer. So thanks to folks that have submitted things to our publication. And then thank you to our panelists today who have agreed to take some time out of their busy schedules to share maybe a little bit more and maybe answer a few questions as they come along. I'm going to do my best. I make this same joke every month, but or every time. You guys aren't always here, but I'm like the Anderson Cooper of this. I've got like all these different panels on my screen right now, and I'm going to do my best to try to make sure we give everybody an opportunity to talk about the great things that you're doing in your class, in your school, and to give all of our viewers the opportunity, the attendees, the opportunity to ask questions that they may have. So what we like to do each month is begin with a little elevator speech, we call it. And it's just a 30 to 60 second summary of what you submitted to be published in the fall issue. By the way, I have mine right here. Hopefully everybody got this, the fall 2019 issue of the Pennsylvania Administrator magazine. So I'm going to begin with Tom and maybe work my way around. The screen that I am looking at might not be the screen that you're all seeing, but I do have a method to my madness of trying to go around and make sure everybody gets a chance. So if you could just take maybe 30 to 60 seconds to kind of talk about the article that you submitted and why you felt it was important to share with your colleagues across the state. Last thing, remember to unmute before you start talking and then mute again when you're finished. Otherwise, we start getting feedback if everybody has their microphones on. So I am going to mute mine and we're going to turn it over to Tom. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. My article was essentially about empowering two teachers in my building to complete a podcast about activities and events that are happening in the school. The focus of that was to do long-form interviews with students and staff to kind of get deeper into some of the lesser-known things, to humanize the staff members, and really to kind of dig deeper in what our students' contributions are, not only to the school but the surrounding community. So just about the process of getting them, time in the school day and what we learned from that.
Now, I know, Tom, I'm going to break my rule here because I know you have to leave soon. And in case we don't get back to you, I did want to ask one question if I can. If you could just take a minute to talk about the grants. You wrote that you helped them procure some mini grants to help fund the podcast. What kinds of grants did you get and what kind of things did you use it to purchase?
So our district has mini grants through a foundation that we have in the district. And, we're a one-to-one K-12 district with MacBooks. So they have a lot of the stuff right at their fingertips they needed. And they started to come once they kind of got excited about what they were doing. They started to come to us to ask for some additional stuff that we just couldn't afford in the building budget. And I didn't want to, make them, feel disenfranchised, but I said, well, let's hold off on this. Let's complete a year of this process. And then, let's build a grant to get you guys, a better machine. So they completed a grant to get, instead of MacBook Airs, they got MacBook Pros. They also bought updated microphones. And they also got a couple of different pieces of editing software that just make it a lot easier for them. Then we actually also got them some additional training through the grant. So, they have to submit the grant. It's determined through the board of that group who gets it. And they actually, have the ability to talk about the people that they've engaged through interviews, but then, who they're getting to listen and so on and so forth there. So it was a way for us to continue to support them, but not, taking money out of what our building allocation was, to show them that we're valuing what they're doing.
Thank you for that, Tom. Yeah, there's always, it always interests me how many teachers aren't aware of the availability of that kind of grant that they would have access to. And it seems like doing a podcast would be right up the alley of a education foundation. So that's good stuff. Okay, let's see. Edward, Dr. Ninetemp, is it, Edward? Am I saying your last name correctly, I hope?
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and give us your 30 to 60-second summary of your article?
Sure. So my article just really explains our journey here with regard to restraint in our special education classrooms. We have a decent amount of students in our district that have needs that are excessive, especially kids that are aggressive or self-injurious. So we learned a trauma-informed method to reduce the use of restraint, and we actually eliminated over a 3-year period in our special ed classrooms. So I wanted to share that because I thought that was important, and I know it's one of those things that people don't like to talk a lot about, but it happens in a lot of districts.
That's great, thank you. And I'm definitely going to have questions for you. I spent the better part of my afternoon yesterday helping to restrain a student, so I'm definitely very interested in hearing more about that. Okay, Ashley Riddle, we're going to have you go next. Go ahead and give folks a summary of your article, if you could, please.
My article was really about building culture and climate. I took on an admin role within my current building, and with that, there needed to be a way that I could kind of build up the culture and climate here, and with that, we went to badging so that we could provide consistent feedback based off of our vision and mission for look-fors that we have in the building for our teachers, and it was a way to almost immediately, but yes, we have follow-up through conversations of things that they could improve, but the badging allowed them to also focus on what they're doing for the work towards those look-for, like the small steps. It may not get us the outcome that we physically see in the classroom right away, but they're working towards that, and that's what the badging is for.
Good stuff, and I like the title of your article too, You've Been Badged. That was really well done. Next, we're going to go to Jeff McCosco from North Penn School District. You want to tell us a little bit about the article you submitted, Jeff?
Sure. Actually, the intent was somewhat selfish. It's my second year into my second principalship, and my first one, 9 years at my previous building, I knew every student, every parent, grandparent, and I came from that super comfortable realm of just having my finger on the pulse of every part of the building. And so I wanted to implement something that would kind of fast forward that feeling in my new building. And I've done so many workshops and staff meetings. When you're working with teachers, you only get that surface level interaction when you're in a staff meeting situation. But when you roll up your sleeves and get side by side with them on the work, then you really get to know what they're thinking and what's bothering them, and it builds a nice relationship in the building. So that's pretty much the gist of my article.
Very good. Thank you, sir. And definitely, again, a really, really interesting topic. Having been through that myself as well, you develop your school and you hire most of the staff, and then you go and leave somewhere else and you feel like you're brand new again. So definitely applicable for a lot of our members, I'm sure. So thank you for submitting that. Peter Henning, we're going to go to you next. Learning by Looking in the Mirror was your article. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. My article was working with Dr. Thomas Starmek here in the Athens Area School District, and it was focused on looking at our professional practice as educators. So both for ourselves as administrators and teachers, highlights our journey from starting instructional rounds from scratch in our district, building trust, and then eventually getting to using video as a self-evaluation and analysis tool, really shifting from looking at teachers' work to what the students are doing in the classroom. And if you haven't used video with your teachers to get them to look at their own practice, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to give it a try.
Very good. And yes, a great idea. Something that's one of those things that I've heard about and been meaning to try. So hoping that listening to you today will give us some ideas on how we can apply all of that. So thank you, Peter. We'll talk more to you in just a couple minutes. And then Eduardo Antonelli is, in addition to being a principal, is also a member of our board of directors. Eduardo is in charge of an increasingly, growingly important topic, and he's our diversity representative, and he's been able to give us a lot of great information to inform our board, and I think also our association on the importance of recognizing equity and diversity. So some really, really important work that we appreciate Eduardo's perspective. And that was a little bit about what your article was about. I didn't mean to summarize it all for you, Eduardo, but why don't you go ahead and fill in some of the gaps maybe that I left out.
Well, first of all, it's very nice to meet all of you. And we had a lot of time. I had questions for all of you on your articles. I wanted to talk about diversity and show evidence of why it's such an important topic. And I think all of us working in schools can recognize that. And I wanted to offer some practical suggestions and advice for building leaders on starting the conversation, because it's a hard conversation to start. It can be a little scary. So I wanted to try to break the ice, so to speak, and give folks a place where they can take that first step. And then I followed that up with a presentation at the conference, and I left feeling very excited because it was clear that the participants, this is something on their mind. So thank you very much.
So I'm going to keep you on, Eduardo, if I can, just since I have you, because as I said, this is growingly important, and for my own sake, and I think from other principals that I've talked to, the biggest obstacle, I think, from my experience with this, is just trying to get the ball moving. I think everyone recognizes that it's an incredibly important topic. I don't think anybody's going to debate whether or not it's something that needs to be addressed both district-wide and statewide. I mean, we can think, on a macro level, and then obviously on a micro level when you get down to schools. So what advice would you have for, let's just say, a building principal who on their own, maybe their district isn't doing anything, so they recognize it's important and they'd like to try to get the ball rolling on their own in their building? What would be some, a couple of steps for them to kind of get that started, would you say?
Well, many of us have to try to avoid creating more work for ourselves. Many of us have to do comprehensive plans. We have to do school climate surveys. And I would say, if you're already doing that, use those processes to gather that information. You will get a lot of good data there. But then I found that having focus groups of students and actually talking to students in small groups, picked at random, you can, kids can see through the adult world real clearly, and they'll give you great insights. But I've seen administrators make some pretty big mistakes where, for example, they will call all students of blank ethnicity to go to the auditorium. Yes, people have done that. So I would say don't do that, but pick at random, be thoughtful about it, but basically get the information, and then from there, try to prioritize and go from there. One of the resources that I shared at the conference was, there's a guy who's at NYU and Temple, Edward Fergus, and I'll put his name on the chat, and he's a professor. He's got there you go. Yeah. See, Jeff has the book. He was one of my friends. She's a principal in Queens, New York, and she said that he was there on site and did work with the staff. So that's kind of my dream for next school year. If I can sweet talk my superintendent to paying what I'm sure will be a hefty price tag, to get him to talk about how we can use a lot of the data that we already have to really focus on equity. And I'm seeing that big school districts like New York City School District, Philadelphia, and a lot of the bigger school districts in our state, they've created offices or positions, administrative positions, to lead on these issues. I have a tiny school district, so it's going to be more homegrown. But there's plenty of work to be done. So those are just general places where I would begin.
That's good stuff. Thank you. Jeff, can you hold that book up again?
Sure.
You're too quick with that. What's that book look like? There we go.
Solving Disproportionality and Achieving Equity, and that's by Edward Fergus. He's working with North Penn. We have him coming out, and it's amazing. Over the summer, he worked with us. I believe he was in for 2 days, and the only thing he did was guide us through our own culture data. And by looking at, it is somewhat embarrassing too, when you look at our disciplinary trends and our achievement level trends, we break it down by gender and race, ethnicity. You don't need much more convincing when you look at your own data and then just these things pop off the page. And it made us kind of rethink some things for sure.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing. Okay.
Could I ask Jeff, when is he going to your school?
When is he coming? He's not coming individually. I'm in North Penn School District. We do a administrative retreat, we call it, in the summertime, where we take a few days and go off site. Nothing fancy, but he was pretty much our guest speaker, and we spent 2 days hearing his message, looking at our data, and then we brought that information back to our school. And he's been back for some administrative workshops. He's coming back again in December. We're actually, I don't know if we're calling it a full book study, but we're working through his text to try to figure out how do we solve this, because truly disproportionality is not just a Pennsylvania problem, or it's national. So it's a big problem that we need to start addressing.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. Thanks, Jeff. Tom, I'm going to go back to you. We're going to shift gears a little bit and go back to podcasting. Being an occasional podcaster myself, I noticed you talked about the challenge about getting the word out, and that's the most frustrating part for me is this simple, tool that you have there, that like the podcasts that I listen to are a great way to decompress after a day, driving home in my car. And it just seems like it's such I kind of feel the same way about podcasting as I felt about Twitter maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that there's this great resource that not enough people are using. Have you come up with ways to try to get the word out, or ideas? And my second part of my question is it a struggle with both the kids and the adults to get interest on that? Or, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me like the kids might automatically be more interested in it than the adults would be.
So in the in-house stuff with the kids, the two guys have done a great job. They've done things like, create like having a Bitmoji contest to see who can make Bitmojis for the podcast, the two hosts. They go on our morning announcements and things like that. And they have a pretty reasonably significant following. They also have done 2 live, since I wrote that piece. They've done 2 live podcasts at like a 5K that our school's Minithon did, and also at a Friday night football game. So I think that was good. We talked about doing like true face-to-face publicity. So they've like literally sat at a Friday night football game with a table and recorded a podcast there, and a lot of people just grab people off the bleachers to talk to them. So I think they really got a lot of people there. We also have pushed it out through like our Blackboard Connect system a couple of times, not every time an episode is released, because we're not trying to use that for that. We also have a robust Facebook and Instagram, Twitter account for the school. We post it on every time they have that, and then they have their own account. They have slightly under 1,000 people is what they're getting right now, according to their internal metrics that they're getting. So, which is pretty good considering they were starting with like a handful, 25 or something like that. So it's pretty strong. The challenge is, if you're listening to podcasts, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and they kind of wanted to do it for 25 minutes, and they're getting well into an hour and a half at this point, because they're having a hard time editing things out, because they're having some really strong topics. They just recently did one about student and adult mental health, and they had teachers and students talking about experiences of mental health, and had a school psychologist and some other contracted people that they were interviewing in there, and it was pretty profound, to the point that we actually had to call some parents before we publish it, to make sure the parents knew what their children were talking about, and let them listen to it beforehand and so on. And everybody still was fine with doing that. But it's a pretty powerful topics that I don't think a lot of people, and even when we talk to some adults in our district that have not listened to podcasts, they don't really know what it was until they kind of were either interviewed or listen to it themselves. So.
And where is this? Is this accessible to anybody? Is it on like in the Apple?
On the Apple? It's on the Apple. They use Anchor is what they do. It's how they originally do it, but you can get it on the Apple. So it's called the Spartan Life. So it's on the Apple Podcast, and then you can get it through Anchor, and then you just share it through there.
Very good. Good. Thank you.
Yep.
And the Spartan Life is
Yep.
the name that folks want to look for.
I actually do have to leave though, but I appreciate
Absolutely. And while you're on there looking for the Spartan Life, look for Rockstar Principles too.
There you go. Absolutely. Have a good one. Thank you,
Tom.
everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Tom. I know you got to run.
Yep.
Edward, I'm going to go back to you next if I can. So when I read about your trauma-informed approach to dealing with restraints and crisis management, everything, it first made me think about restorative practices. And let me make the connection here for you, because I'm a big advocate of restorative practices when it comes to dealing with discipline. And I think it gets a bad rap. I think people, have a lot of misperceptions about what restorative practices might be. And I'm guessing that your initial response from folks when this idea kind of came about, that there might have been some resistance to it. People have a hard time with change, and teachers and educators especially have a hard time with change because we're so passionate about what we do for our kids. So how did you overcome that? I'm hoping you're going to say yes, that there were some obstacles like that, because I'm curious. Again, I like to try to give people that are viewing this some insight into what they're going to face if they're going to try and take something like this on.
It was a huge culture change for us because, for our district has a long history of supporting students with pretty significant behavioral challenges in the district here. So the staff were really well trained, and I was a trainer in physical intervention, so they were good at it, and they did a great job of it. And so there was definitely, and in fact, there still are a few people who are skeptical of the approach in general. So yeah, that was a tough thing. But I think the issue for us was we had a couple of due process cases that didn't end up being resolved because of the restraint, but they started because parents were mad about a restraint. And so that put people were well aware of of how those cases went and how challenging it is to sit in front of a hearing officer. And we also had a couple of OCY investigations. Parents complained to OCY about staff abusing their children. None of it founded. No one ever got in any trouble. Everything was done correctly. But moving away from injury, staff injuries, student injuries, and the risks that go along with restraint really made a lot of people believers. And our data was superb all from the start to the finish. People didn't think we'd be able to not restrain some of the students who had long histories of aggressive assaultive behavior. But our data has proven that otherwise. So I still ask at the beginning of my classes if anybody would rather go back. And we went from decent amounts of people who are really resistant to very few people who would want to go back to holding kids again.
And just for clarification, this whole program, was this something that your district got from somewhere else, or is this being something that's been created within your district?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I wish I would have thought of it, but it comes out of a company called Grafton in Winchester, Virginia, where they actually had about 15 years ago, they had a death at their facility. And their CEO came in and said, "You guys got to stop holding kids and holding adults." And so they really worked through this whole process. And now with all the, and the trauma-informed piece is huge. So it's really about trying to understand why kids might act the way that they do, as opposed to just, saying, "Oh, well, there's nothing else we can do but hold them down right now." So it's shifted our mindset here. And we've had really, really good success. Even we have an RTF in our district, and we haven't eliminated restraints at the RTF, but we've reduced them by 80% over the last year. So our workman's comp coordinators, they love us because we have so many less injuries and staff that are on leave because of injuries.
Very good. I have more questions, but I want to keep going around.
Sure.
If we have time, I'm going to get back to you for sure. Okay. Ashley, so if you can, you've been badged. I've read about how this is something that just appears on teachers' mailboxes.
Yeah.
How does this happen? How does somebody get badged?
So basically, for example, right now, we're working a lot towards small group instruction across the board, K-5, all the time, and doing that based off of we use NEWA maps, so using the learning continuum to support those small groups. So we badge when we're in, and we're seeing small groups based off of that data. So they can get a data badge, they can get a small group badge. We implemented Pontus and Pinnell's classroom, guided reading classroom last year. So asking questions within the text, beyond the text. So they got badges for those things because they were part of our look fors. So whatever our look fors are for the year is what they can get badged for. And then it just goes in their mailbox. So they come to it after, obviously, one of us have walked through or done an observation.
And how many are there? Just a few select people that can give badges, or
Anybody,
are people deputized across the board?
anybody can give a badge. So they just have to alert the administration. So I've had teachers come to me to badge each other. We have reading specialists that push into all of our classrooms. So they can badge, obviously, the classroom teacher and vice versa. So there's a lot of push in for us. So it allows the teachers to badge each other.
And those badges are there displayed for everyone to see, and it's on their mailbox, right?
Well, it goes in their mailbox, and then once a week in my weekly reminders and Friday wrap-ups, I'll post like the running list of all the badges that have been awarded throughout the week. And then at the end of the month, there's a drawing for a gift card. There's 6 gift cards that we give out for $10 at our.
How many staff are we talking about that you do this for?
There are 101 staff in our building. We have 64 professional staff, and anybody can be badged in that 101, including our custodian, cafeteria, secretaries. Everybody's part of that.
So what's something that a custodian could do to get badged?
We have a helping hand badge that is handed out often for our custodian staff, as well as our secretaries here and the cafeteria ladies. There's also growth mindset. That's one that's been around for the last 2 years, because as long as we're looking and working towards growing and learning, a lot of things we can give for that. So those 2 are good ones.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Peter, I got to ask, how did you get teachers to agree to allow themselves to be videotaped? This is like, I'm almost afraid to ask you, because I don't want you giving away a secret that could potentially be, big news for you somewhere down the road here. Because this is something that I've been interested in. I know a lot of people have been interested in, and there's definitely a fear factor associated with that. So how did you overcome that?
We took some of Ashley's gift cards and we started bribing. No, it really just came about organically. We started instructional rounds, and teachers really got on board with it and really liked watching students in other people's classrooms. And I think it got them more in tune with watching their own. Then we ran up against a problem everybody has, which is a substitute shortage. So we wanted to keep that going, and working with Dr. Starmack from Bloomsburg University, we started talking about video. It's just a wasted resource that we don't tap into. So then we had the typical barriers you talked about, John, like how are we going to get them to do it? So I said, all right, I'm going to start with myself, and I videoed myself at a faculty meeting, and I watched it, and I offered to let other people see it if they wanted to. Nobody did. It was super boring, something for my wife and I. But I was able to look at myself and analyze my own practice. I had a couple goers, just like everybody does in their school. We have certain strong relationships with instructors in our school. So I started pushing them. And then every formal observation I had that year, I offered to use video for it. And I either offered to video myself using my phone to just record students, or we purchased a couple swivel robot cameras. If you're not familiar with them, they track the user around the room while they're teaching. Teacher said yes. I was shocked. I guess I was more like a used car salesman than anything. And what I found was in my evaluations after the observation, we always have teachers do a self-reflection rubric before we rate. I'm not sure if that's how everybody does it. It always feels a little bit empty because they haven't seen the same lesson that you've seen. They were in it. They didn't get to watch the kids. And after watching the kids, I found teachers were much more honest and open with their criticism of themselves. They rated themselves harder. They actually looked at the rubric because they were looking at the lesson. And the growth was enormous after that. I have some repeat offenders coming back asking to use it this year, and I'm pushing it out to a new round of teachers through formal observations.
So just for technical purposes, I guess, so you didn't roll it out with everyone initially?
I tried. I rolled it out at a faculty meeting. Asked our instructional coach to push it. What really I think got the trust was the nice thing about Swivel is you can set up your own account. So when the video's done, it comes directly to you. Nobody else can view it.
Hmm.
And that kind of helped us overcome the barriers with our association over worries about how the video might be used.
Very good. Good. Thank you. I see Susan Seibert has joined us. Susan, thank you. I'm glad you could make the time to jump in and join us here. I wanted to give you the same opportunity that the other authors had. If you wanted to just take a minute or so to kind of give us a quick summary of your article, if you could, that was published in the most recent Pennsylvania Administrator magazine, and just tell us a little bit about what it is that you wrote and why you wrote it.
Okay, hi everyone. It's great to be with you all today. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. My two co-authors couldn't be here today, but we wrote an article about trying to cultivate a climate of creativity and connectiveness based on a book that we used in a doctoral class that I teach. And the book is called The Wonder Wall, and it was written by a former superintendent of schools. His name is Peter Gamwell. I actually have the book right here. It's a really easy read, and it has a current copyright. It's a 218 copyright. And it basically starts out with him telling a story about a time that he went into a kindergarten room, and he was intrigued by something the teacher was doing in there. She had a big piece of chart paper up, and she called it the Wonder Wall. And she asked the children to use Post-it notes to wonder about particular directives that she would give them. It might be a science lesson or just an idea. And this superintendent of schools was just amazed at what these children were coming up with in terms of creativity when it was completely unrestricted. And so he started to do some reflecting about what he was doing to foster a sense of creativity within the school system where he worked. And he came to the conclusion that he may have actually been squelching the creativity, let alone not fostering it. And he identified some imperatives to fostering creativity and different conditions that have to take place within a school system for this to happen. And we took another approach to fostering this creativity by including a feeling of connectiveness. And we actually went back and used some of Maslow's work of feeling of belonging that people want to have within an organization. So we just highlighted some of the things that happen in schools that sometimes actually squelch creativity among our faculty and staff. And the article is really a piece that is asking us to be reflective, taking a good long look in the mirror as to whether our actions are having an effect that people feel a sense of belonging and setting the stage for creative solutions or not.
Wow, that's an awful lot, and all off the top of your head. Impressive. In your car? Looks like you're in your car as well.
I am.
Okay. All right. I will try to come back to you with a couple of follow-up questions. I just noticed, I'm sorry to Eduardo and Ashley, that you had questions earlier. So I'm going to let you ask your questions of the other panelists after I ask Jeff something. Okay. So Eduardo and Ashley, I'll come to you for your questions in a moment. So Jeff, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but how do you find time to do all of this? Where do you make time in the day? How do you deal with the barrage of emails that are filling your inbox and the parent messages and all the administrivia that we get bogged down in? How do you put all that aside and make time to do this walk with your teachers during the day?
Well, let me tell you, I learned as a third grade teacher. I was a rookie third grade teacher, and I had a partner teacher who did everything I did, probably 10 times better. And every year she put on a top to bottom classroom musical with costumes, and she made all the costumes. that lesson right there told me that we find time for what's important. And like, let me tell you, I'm probably 75 emails behind right now. And, there's other things that have to get done before I leave for the day. But the payoff is too great to not, work side by side with my teachers and my students.
So give a quick, because you alluded to some of it in your article, but give a quick. What is the payoff? What kinds of what direct things that you've had from your experience? Don't speak generally, like specifically. Give us some examples of stuff that like just totally gave you goosebumps and charged your batteries when you had it happen.
It's trust. It's absolute trust. People, you get those knocks on your door. Hey, I know I only have a minute, or do you have a minute? And just the fact that people are coming to me with things that if there's no comfort level, they wouldn't bother coming to me. The PVAS results just came out. My fourth grade is distraught because they've been working their tails off and seem to be striking out in many different ways. And rather than, of course, we're all sad for a moment and we look at the data, but the next thing they do is say, okay, when can we meet to start, wrapping our minds around how we're going to address this? So I've been part of buildings where when bad news hits, everybody scatters. And I'm proud to say that when we have to endure those kind of things, everybody in this building comes together. And I might not be the center of that, but I am a part of that. And I'm happy that's the way it is.
That's just awesome to hear, and I'm sure your teachers would speak similarly, if not even bigger. That kind of stuff it's worth its weight in gold to teachers to kind of see that and know that and experience that. I'm sure that does a lot for your morale and a lot for the buy-in when you're trying to do things in your building.
Absolutely. And just real quick with the email thing, what I had to learn the hard way is if I'm too responsive to an email that comes in from a parent, you start teaching people that they can have a minute-by-minute conversation with the principal.
Yep, absolutely right.
I learned that lesson.
One of my colleagues recently said to me the best thing, and I did it too. I did it as well. I turned off notifications for email on my phone. I don't get when I get an email, it goes into my computer, it goes into my email and everything. And if I have my laptop open, it'll make a sound. My phone does not make a sound when I get emails. So if I want to, if I have time to check email when I'm sitting at home or something else, I'll check email. That's fine. But if I'm sitting, with my family at dinner, I'm not going to hear any sounds going off. That email box can fill up, and it's not going to impact me one way or the other.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to get some cross-panelist questions. Eduardo had a question for Edward, and then Ashley had a question for Peter. So Eduardo, go ahead. Edward had done an article on a trauma-informed approach to reduce restraints. Just a summary for anybody who might be joining us now. So Eduardo, go ahead.
Our school data is moving in the opposite direction of yours. We're having more restraints. We just had a staff member injured yesterday. So your topic is very timely for us. I looked at the website. It looks like the equipment is not that expensive. How much professional development and how much time is needed to take a building to adopt some of these practices from the Ureku company or that approach? Can you kind of talk about how much of a time and financial investment we're looking at?
Here we go. Yeah, sure. So it takes, so how we did it here is it's a train the trainer model. So it costs $700 per trainer to get up and running. So, and then it's an annual recertification. It's $300 a person. So it's pretty inexpensive to get a trainer in your district. And then the equipment, it costs about $1,000 per classroom. That's about the ballpark that we use here. And then we turn that training around for our staff. We train our frontline staff, our special ed teachers, and our paraprofessionals. It's a 1-day, 8-hour training. So they get the first part of that day is the trauma-informed piece, de-escalation piece. and the last part of the day is the blocking. So it's pretty inexpensive. And the equipment's awesome. I mean, we haven't replaced anything for 3 years now, so it's really lasts.
Well, thank you again. It's a very timely topic, so we're going to be looking into what we're doing right now is not ideal.
Yeah, I think you'll be really pleased. And that company, they have their trainers and their team. They're all direct care people. They've all done the work. They're not, professional facilitators. They're really great.
And Edward, before you go, just thinking, listening to you talk, and again thinking about my own building, having to do this. One thing maybe that might be a driving force too is the impact. I don't think we ever think about the impact this has on other kids having to witness, restraints happening. It kind of, starts a lot of talking amongst the kids. We've had kids we had to counsel them after having to witness a restraint take place. So have you seen, I'm sure you've gotten some kind of, positive overall school climate result from this as well, right?
Yeah, it's become a part of our culture. Like you walk in, even in our high school, there's kids walking down the hallway. Kids will carry the pads themselves. They're everywhere. And we do have kids ask us what they're for. And, it's just become a normal part of the conversation is to help keep everybody safe. So yeah, it's super positive all the way around, 1,000%. And I was the biggest skeptic because I'd been training in other styles all my life, and I ate a big piece of humble pie, and when we converted to doing this. So yep, and this is the company for those of you guys. I don't know if you can see it. UKERU. They have a great website. So check it out.
Good stuff. Thank you, sir. All right, Ashley, you had a question for Peter about the video recording of teacher lessons.
Yes, I do this, but in like brief snapshots for my teachers, small group instruction, things like that. And I never even thought about the union and association and what that was going to do. Nobody even questioned it. I just do it. And so my question though is I really do have a hard time. I do it on an iPad. I upload it to Drive. It takes forever because it's just an 8-minute video could take 25 minutes to upload to Google Drive. So I don't know, you were talking about the robot, I think, that follows them around. What's the cost of something like that?
Well, they'll be $500 to $700 depending on the model. But if you have an iPad and you set that up, you can set up a Swivel account. It's swivl.com and set up a Swivel account without the robot if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah.
And then basically whoever's got the account set up, the email link gets sent right to them. It's a much quicker process.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. We got about 15 minutes left. And I'm looking to see. Oh, Eduardo had to leave. All right. So Eduardo left. I know he had to step out. Is anyone else going to have to leave early?
I will.
Okay. So Ashley, before you leave, let me just give you one more opportunity. So next steps, is there anything you're looking to do to grow the badging that's taking place in your school, or things you're looking to do, expanding it to other buildings, or other people looking to take advantage of this? Any next steps that you're looking to do with your program?
The district is almost looking at it as a professional development tool as well. Like, can we badge? Or PLC is the focus of ours throughout the district. So they're looking to see, depending on what PLCs you go through, do we badge you for that? And that way you have that almost like a certificate in some type of way to add to your repertoire as a person to go to for this particular strategy or classroom tool, whatever that would be. So that's something that the district has talked about based off of the success.
All right, good. Thank you. Susan, I know one of the things you had mentioned were some of the speed bumps that you encountered, and talking about like finding the time. How did you work around the time factor? I know we've talked about that with a couple of folks here already, but anything that, through your experience you found that kind of helped you tackle that time challenge?
Yeah, thank you for your question. There were actually two things that we realized. One is that celebrations don't have to be at the end of big events. or big accomplishments. So we've moved to try to do more celebrating in small increments and at any time. So, and even at the beginning of things, like if a group of students are starting a new story in their reader, that should be celebrated. Or if they get halfway through something. So these things don't have to be traditional types of celebrations. Gamwell mentioned, we think of celebrations in terms of parties and balloons and cakes and things. It could just be, celebrated through a newsletter or a visit to a classroom. They really don't have to take a lot of time. And the other thing that doesn't take any time is to make a call for something that we termed as creative solutions. As administrators and faculty members, we are trained to think about the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? And we kind of try to go down all the different avenues that might happen with an initiative or with an action in anticipation of what might happen. And that's a creativity blocker. That's a big creativity blocker. So when you're trying to problem solve, and it's hard, it was easy for the kindergarten kids to be creative because they haven't been trained to squelch all this creativity, but we as adults have. And so just the idea of calling for creative solutions. So if you come up to a problem, as an administrator, just put it out there to your faculty. This is our problem. I'm asking everybody to just throw caution to the wind and think of any creative solutions. Don't think of the things that could be blocking that. Just throw some things out there. And the faculty have been able to come up with solve some problems just by setting that tone of free thinking. So I would encourage everybody to give that a try, because as adults, we definitely have filters and shut ourselves down. And it does go back to the sense of belonging. We want to try to do what we think others will accept. And sometimes creative thinking is kind of quirky. And that idea that the teacher had with the Wonder Wall, we'll just put up a chart in the faculty room and ask faculty, hey, put up a Post-it note of a creative solution. And sometimes they're kind of out there, but eventually we can kind of work them to come up with a creative solution.
Outstanding. Good stuff. Thank you. I saw that Jeff, I think, had a question for Peter. I don't know if you were going to type it or not, Jeff, or you just want to go ahead and ask it, give Peter a chance to talk some more about what he wrote about.
I was in the middle of typing it, but I'll talk it.
Okay.
Just real quick, we're moving more towards personalized learning. So when I go and observe a math class, there might be 5 different workstations happening at the same time. So I love the videotaping idea, and I've done it, and it's nice when it's focused on that teacher. But when I need to pick up 5 different things perhaps happening at the same time, any suggestions for, I could do the video part, but I'm concerned about the audio part. How am I going to pick up all the conversations that are an important part of that lesson?
So that's the one weakness with the swivel robot. You need to have a microphone that's portable. So you can get some Bluetooth microphones that can link up to an iPad pretty easily. They're not very expensive. They can be worn on a lanyard. I don't know that you can pick up everything ever. So I think what I've learned to do is to hone in on one specific area. And we've I've actually came out of some discussion with some teachers who do stations like that, and just honing in on a station away from the teacher. They don't get to see that. They want to see if the kids are engaged and hear the conversation. So we might just station the iPad right there for a half an hour and see what happens in that one spot. So I guess my approach is more zooming in, but I think you could find some ways to handle the audio obstacle.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I'm thinking if I set up an iPad in every learning station, then the teacher could pick and choose which one they want to look at. And
yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. You can get them all at once.
Interesting.
I hadn't thought of that either.
Look at that. Look at the two of you. See, connecting like that right in front of our eyes. That's great. Good stuff. So we are running out of time here. We got about 10 minutes left. And I want to, recognize and appreciate everybody's time. You've already given up so much. So Before anyone else has to go, I do like to go around and kind of ask you the same question I asked Ashley. Just what are your next steps? What kind of stumbling blocks are you hitting right now? What are you thinking about doing next to kind of expand? Because I feel like that's important. You know, it's great that, amazing actually, great isn't even the word. The stuff we're talking about here is just, it's hitting on all different areas that I think are really important for those of us that are in the job. But we can't rest on that, right? We have to be constantly thinking about what's going to be next, what's the next application of this. So I'm going to go around and just ask, you know, what are your next steps? What are you thinking about doing to expand or move in a different direction or whatever? And I'll start with Peter.
So our next step is to develop, or to get teachers to look at video together. I think anything in isolation, you can only get one opinion. So trying to get teachers to take a lesson study type approach to watching video together.
Very good. Thank you. Jeff, what are you going to do next to try and make sure you're out there all the time, right? Because I'm sure they notice when you're not there. That's the one downside to doing all that.
For sure. You know what? We have some great instructional coaches. So bringing them in to be kind of like wingmen for me and women. But I think the key is to celebrate the successes and also don't bury the challenges that we try to tackle and are not successful with, because I just want to continue to build that culture of, we don't have to be perfect, but accepting the status quo when it's not getting us where we need to be is just not okay. Thanks. This has been great, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Edward, what's next for your school district in tackling this big issue?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed hearing from all of you guys. Our next approach here is, I think we have the crisis piece down pretty well. We work on debriefing afterwards to make sure our staff is staying creative and making sure they're being able to solve the unique challenges that come with using the crisis management stuff. But we're really trying to get all of our staff district-wide trauma informed and really having that conversation about, what's happened to kids as opposed to why they act in that way. So we're really going district-wide trauma informed, and I think it's changing the conversation to a more comforting kind of approach towards education. It feels right.
And I will say, I'm on, fortunately, through my position as president-elect, I got to be invited on the governor's board, the school safety and security board. And, they're the ones that are responsible for Safe to Say and the grant funding that comes out each year from the state. And there was a very heavy focus on trauma-informed, on including some sort of trauma-informed approach to whatever you're going to use that grant money for. They want to see that you're having a trauma-informed approach. So you're ahead of the curve a little bit when it comes to that, Edward. And if anybody else who's listening is thinking applying for any of those safety and security grants, make sure you have some kind of trauma-informed component in there as well.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, Susan, anything you want to say to wrap up? Next steps, what you're planning to do next with the work that you've done?
Just that we want to continue to identify celebrations and try to include our students in that and our faculty, and keep the focus on creativity and the positive, not just always problem solving. So we're focusing right now on small celebrations actually along the way.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of you. Thank you to, I know, Ashley and Eduardo and Tom that had to step out, and then Edward and Jeff and Peter and Susan for sticking around here till the end. We appreciate, as I said in the beginning, so much the great articles that we get for the publication, and I want to encourage all of you to write again and talk to others about writing and submitting. It really, I can't say enough how powerful it is to be able to publish something that gets in the laps of working principals who can see what other principals are doing, because that's how we stay up to date. That's how we keep up to it with everybody else. So please keep on sending in those articles, and to all of you that participated, thank you for your time, and keep doing the great work that you're doing. All right, have a great night, everybody. Thanks for your time.